I've been shouting from the roofs for years about the evil that is fossil fuels. That's oil, gas, and coal. That's right, evil. This is episode 100 of a podcast that's over many years has been repeatedly warning about that evil. They're dirty. They pollute the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. They're in our blood. They're in our lungs. They're in our babies. They destroy our habitat. They're expensive. They lead to massive environmental destruction. They're also controlled by very few people at the expense of the many. They need to constantly flow or else all hell breaks loose, and that's not a bug, that's a feature. Everything I just listed is a fact, and we are living live through yet another example of the all-around, planetary scale disaster that oil, gas, and coal are. Yet, governments have proven repeatedly that they are stubbornly unable to learn, stubbornly unable to help their own people get off this addictive evil. Again and again, and right now, I see it all around me, and it makes me incredibly angry. And this episode is about, yet again, what I expect is going to happen because of the planetary disaster unveiling around us. And we're only on day 11 of the Israeli and American attacks on Iran. No one knows. And if they think they do, then don't believe them. Absolutely no one knows. And I don't care who it is, the president of whatever country. No one knows how this is going to end, except for this one fact. It's not going to end well. And the fundamental reason for that is our dependence on fossil fuels, aided and abetted by politicians and big oil and their stooges everywhere, pretty much around the world, with some honorable exceptions. Welcome to a particularly angry episode 100. That's 100 of the Angry Clean Energy Guy with me, Asad Razouk. Notwithstanding everything that you've just heard, I am so happy you're here. Thank you. Now, for those of you perhaps not paying enough attention, let's just go through what's going on right around us right this minute. We've had a massive disruption of the supply of crude and fuel from the Persian Gulf, and that's triggered multiple countries pressing the panic button. We've already had, only 11 days in, fuel-saving measures announced in Pakistan, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Bangladesh. We have a diesel shortage which hits garment output in Bangladesh. India, all 1.4 billion people, are threatened by literally not being able to cook dinner. 85% of liquid petroleum gas transits through Hormuz. So, what do you expect? Restaurants are shutting across 10 Indian states. Gujarat ceramics are a historical feature at this stage. And 1.4 billion people in India are learning the price of a choke point. They're learning the price of fossil fuel addiction. So the country has had to invoke emergency measures and give priority to gas sales to key sectors. Why? Because the gas just isn't getting there. Egyptians, that's all 100 million of them, are suddenly grappling with two shock waves. An overnight 30%, 40%, nobody's counting anymore, surge in oil prices, a rapid slide in their currency against a backdrop of years of sharp currency devaluation, mounting debt pressures, and rapidly increasing living costs. In the Iranian capital of Tehran, people have been poisoned because the Israelis chose to strike oil storage depots, which darkened the sky, prompting health warnings from authorities about toxic fumes and potentially dangerous rainfall. Yes, fossil fuels kill. In Vietnam, the government told people to work from home because they're running out of fuel. Asia-wide, petrol prices are surging. Traders can't even find alternative supply. Thousands of flights have been canceled. Airlines have had to reroute everything. They've had to carry extra fuel. They've had to make emergency refueling stops. And it's just getting started. Fuel prices are, of course, surging also across Australia, across Europe, with no end in sight. The UAE Ruwais refinery, one of the largest in the world, is offline. Saudi Arabia's biggest refinery is offline. Qatar's top LNG facility, on which quite a chunk of Asia is dependent, is shut. And as I said before, this is just day 11. It's frankly incredibly disappointing to me that politicians worldwide still don't get it. And I'm going to put it in very stark terms. I'm going to tell you what they don't get. Dear politicians everywhere, if your energy depends on fossil fuels, you, as you can see right now, are not a sovereign nation. You're a hostage. And, dear politicians everywhere, the sun does not send a bill, and the wind does not charge for delivery ever. It's really that simple. And dear politicians everywhere, it should also help that renewable energy is cheaper, cleaner, faster to deploy, democratic, distributed, sovereign, and within your borders. Shouldn't it? Yet, this is the umpteenth fossil fuel crisis, and we see how many governments have let their people down. Again and again and again. And honestly, if that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what does. We're going to see suffering in Bangladesh, suffering in India, suffering in multiple Asian nations. We already have people crossing the frontier from Cambodia and Laos to buy their fuel in Vietnam because it's available and cheaper, but that's not going to last. And what I hope is that countries finally get it and do something decisive rather than keep looking for excuses, keep hosting big oil and welcoming them, when all that's happening is that these people are making you, countries, a hostage. And that's just a fundamental vulnerability that fossil fuels have compared to renewable energy. I mean, that's just a fact. But here is the good news. Get ready. There's another huge renewable energy and smart grid push coming. It's just inevitable because it makes sense and because it's criminal not for it to be coming. Literally criminal. There's also something else going on in parallel. Oil's geopolitical leverage is being systematically vaporized in front of our eyes, but maybe not too many people are looking. China alone is in the middle of spending $250 billion on manufacturing green capacity outside China. That's outside China. To put that number into perspective, that's more than the inflation-adjusted Marshall Plan deployed after World War II. This is a tidal wave of cheap, long-lasting, recyclable solar batteries and EVs everywhere and all at once. That's making fossil fuel dominance look like a relic. And as I've argued before, any country that doesn't get into that bandwagon much faster is going to be a loser in the very medium term, 20 years maximum. Because you see what's happening. What do petro addicts do? They wage illegal wars to squeeze the last drops of profits. Because while we're all suffering, guess what? There are people making money right now. It's just that there are very few of them. But the fact remains that the age of oil is finished because we built something better, cheaper, and impossible to stop. And the era of geopolitical power tied to a barrel of oil is being crushed by the sheer manufacturing might of clean energy. Now, I remember that not long ago, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz wasn't even taken seriously by anybody. Even though 20% of the world's oil supplies travel through Hormuz, as does 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas. And by the way, the people most dependent on all this are the Asian countries, and they all knew that. But just nobody put it in their calculations. And Asia is especially exposed to an energy price shock if the Strait of Hormuz remains shut, even another 2 days, let alone weeks. Because 89%, that's 89% of the crude oil and the oil condensate volumes passing through Hormuz are shipped to Asia. And that's not the end of it, because 83% of the LNG that goes through the strait is also shipped to Asia. The other big losers are European countries, because of course Europe imports 90% of its fossil fuels. And you can see everywhere the signs of panic. Thailand, for example, and China both banned most exports of oil and gas and products days ago. South Korea issued an alert and is already talking to refineries about releasing some of the strategic petroleum reserve. Same thing in Japan. And by the way, same thing for the American driver, because gas at the pump in the United States is also going up. The only two countries that I can think of that are not really affected by all this are Russia, on the one hand, because it's simply making a lot more money from the oil that it has, and whose supply has not been affected, and where sanctions are being lifted also on its ability to export all that oil. So that's Russia. And then China, because China has been since 2012 in the midst of a strategic push of gigantic proportion to insulate itself from exactly this type of event. China, very clearly, over the years, has said it does not want to be hostage to big oil, and it's not going to allow it. And it's always said that its build-out of solar, wind, batteries, and EVs is intended to shield it from depending on foreign sources of energy. Plus, of course, China has its own reserves of fossil fuels and an enormous amount in storage as well. And so its decision to invest heavily in its green economy looks like genius right this second, doesn't it? And if you look again with slightly different eyes at the fact that 53% of all new car sales in China are EVs, you can see the leverage that China is gaining because of the rollout of solar, wind, battery, and EVs at scales never seen before, ever, anywhere else. And in some cases, at a scale equal to the rest of the world combined. And the reason for all that is because when you actually look at oil consumption by sector for the entire world, you'll see that 65% of the oil that we consume is for transport. So if you take out road transport from the equation, because, for example, all your cars have become EVs, then oil producers have zero leverage over you. Yes, China needs some plastics, but that's a tiny share of total demand. 65% of our addiction to oil is because of one sector, which is the transport sector, and the Chinese get it. Guess who gets it also? The Norwegians. Something like 98% of all the cars in Norway are EVs. Why, when Norway has so much oil? Because the Norwegians would just rather sit, benefit from disruptions in the oil market, sell their fossil fuels at high prices, while themselves not consuming them, and therefore not having that opportunity of selling fossil fuels at expensive prices because of crises. And at the end of it, this attack by the Americans and Israel on Iran has reinforced, boosted, fortified, strengthened the case for investment in clean energy sources and battery storage. Enough with nations rushing to secure oil and gas supplies. Enough with dependency on literally a handful of companies and countries. Enough with the pollution from fossil fuels. Enough with the climate impact from fossil fuels. Enough with the cost of fossil fuels. Wind and solar actually provide price stability, because once you've spent the money to build the facility, you have quasi-total certainty over what the actual cost profile is going to look for decades. Why? Because of what I said before. The sunlight, your fuel, is free. And so is your other fuel, which is wind. And what drives me particularly nuts is seeing countries today in 2026, maybe not right this second, but certainly 3 weeks ago, still building out gas-fired power plants and LNG import and storage infrastructure. I mean, for God's sake, can't you see what is blindingly obvious all around you? Let's try and end on a slightly more positive note. I hope this war is going to end very soon. I also expect that we're going to learn the lessons, because these lessons have been taught to us so many times, and they're always the same lessons, as you just heard. Meanwhile, we must accelerate, not just continue, accelerate in every country, no exception, the rollout of electric cars, electric scooters, electric buses, trains, because oil will have enormously less strategic significance if we stop burning it on the road. And we also need to deploy solar, wind, and storage. In other words, the proof of sovereignty and energy independence, faster, everywhere, and with no excuses. Because as I argued in episode 99, there is something else going on at the same time. We're in the midst of a humongously large AI boom, and the consequences haven't really been digested. There is now something also called sovereign AI. So you're not only going to be a hostage of oil, but you're also going to be soon a hostage to AI unless you do three things. And for more details, go to episode 99. Appoint a dedicated minister of AI right this second. Start building your domestic data infrastructure, and then follow that with a tsunami of solar, wind, and batteries. In any case, there's no other choice. It's not like you can build a massive AI infrastructure without solar, wind, and battery storage. And remember, a nation owns its AI future when it also owns its energy future. They're actually two sides of the same coin. AI sovereignty creates a massive and non-negotiable demand for renewables. That's what it does. And countries and neighbors should be building AI energy clusters. So countries cooperating because they want to build their own sovereign AI. And one of the fundamental pillars of that cooperation would be co-investing in renewables and cross-border solar and wind grids, which are designed specifically to power high compute zones. The answers to what we're going through are all around us. Go implement them. It's high time. Thank you for listening to this episode 100 of The Very Angry Clean Energy Guy, and have, I hope, a wonderful couple of weeks.